my view of the world is that people do want to use the best tools or products available. And so if we can just do that, we have much more likely chance to succeed. And then you can do all those other things, but I don't want to do all those other things if the product isn't good.
Welcome to Spotlight On, where we examine the technology shaping our world through conversations with the people building it.
Welcome to Spotlight On. I'm your host, Miles Clements, with Linear's CEO and co-founder, Karri Saarinen. Karri, thanks a ton for being here. This is going to be fun. For people who don't know the Linear story, tell us, what is Linear?
So Linear is a purpose-built tool for planning and building products. So we help modern software teams to streamline some of their normal software workflows when you're building software, like planning a roadmap, planning projects, executing on those projects, tracking bugs and tracking issues. And we do a lot of more, but generally we are the tool for the technical organization or the product organization.
Yep. You came back from Linear's last team offsite talking about this concept of simple strategies executed well, which I think is a Charlie Munger quote, which I didn't expect from you, but I was very impressed by. Is it fair to say that that was the guiding principle in the early days? Simple strategy, just executed really, really well and thoughtfully?
Yeah, I wasn't thinking about that quote back then, but it was basically the thinking was that, hey, what if we just do this product really well and make it work, make it really fast, make it enjoyable to use, make it kind of interesting, because again, if you think about this category, it's like a project management or bug tracking. It's not the most exciting thing for anyone really, but it's kind of like the walls in a building. It's you need those things, you need the walls, you need this kind of issue tracker, and everyone in this industry kind of has to use it.
Right.
So it's very needed and important, but it's not something people think about a lot. So it's almost like we have to wake up people a little bit to actually these things could be much better and they could be much more exciting. So I think there was that kind of simple idea of, can we just do it the best we can and also make sure that it really works well for the end users, which are the engineers and the builders, which was our experience too, that maybe the tools work well for the management, but it won't work for us as a builder. So we wanted to flip that it should work really well for the builders and the teams. And we should just somehow figure out the management side of things.
Right.
But that the management side is kind of secondary because the work actually happens in the ground and with those builders.
Right.
And they are also this real source of truth for this kind of system. They know, the engineers know, did they do this task? Did they fix this bug, or did they write this feature or not? So they're always the source for this information. So making them enjoy using the product and reducing the friction for them to use the product creates this more a valuable foundation for the whole business, where all the information in the system is much more up to date and more real. And then if you start building the different management layers or functions on top of that, it's much more connected to the reality.
Right.
Because I think there's been actually attempts of this problem before, but some companies kind of approach this from the top down, where it's well, as a top down person, I want to, or a leadership person, I want to know what's going on. So then they built this tool that is really molded for the higher level people, but then no one in the ground uses it.
Right.
So then if there's no information in the system, it's almost like a fantasy football. You're operating this fantasy football team in this tool, but there's no players in it. You just have these fantasy players, but they're not actually no one's actually doing anything there.
Right.
So what we are trying to build is more that here's the tool for the whole company, but the core of the tool is that the engagement on the layer that really matters is that the engineering layer is very high, and they produce the information in the system, and then we can do stuff with that information to inform the different layers of the management about what's going on.
Right. So you're actually plugged into the heartbeat of the company.
Yeah.
Right. We know each other pretty well, so I'm going to get right into the spicy stuff if that's okay. So we met a couple of years ago, and we both know that you didn't need the capital when you were raising your Series B. You were profitable at the time. You hadn't even touched your Series A. Today, you haven't touched your Series A or B. In fact, I think you have more cash in the bank than the sum total of capital that you've raised. So why did you do the financing, and why did you let us invest?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is an interesting position to be in. Like a lot of times, normally startups, you are building the business, you are burning a lot of money to build that business or build the growth, but we kind of like found ourselves in this position that the business is actually growing faster than we're able to spend the money. But to kind of answer your question, a lot of times like each of the rounds, we almost like never needed the money, but we felt that there's something like a next stage happening with the company that it might be like a good time to bring someone new on board and more people on board, as well as think about like what is that like next stage look like. So what was happening with the Series B is that we started seeing more traction from these larger companies, and we didn't know what it will exactly mean. Like there could be a chance that we actually do have to hire more people, or we need to hire more like salespeople or some like engineering or some kind of other type of things. So there is a chance that like we actually will need more money. And often I like to raise the money when there's a good moment to do that, when the company is looking strong and we have interest from investors, rather than waiting to a time that something is going wrong at that very moment.
Right.
And I think there was a timing question here too, is that there was this, like we had the SERP era of like companies raising a lot of money, and we sell our product to linear to a lot of startups.
Right.
And what we could see already in our side is that companies are going down, they're doing layoffs. So there was also like a market timing component that we were not sure what the next few years is going to look like for anyone in this industry. So It might mean also for us that like we would actually like growth might slow down because the whole market is slowing down, which kind of happened, but it didn't happen that much than we maybe like what was the worst case we expected.
Right.
But yeah, like to kind of like the short answer is that I think there is like the component of understanding like this company is in some kind of like tipping point or some kind of new next stage, and it's like those moments I think is a good time to like bring someone else in. So you came in and joined the board, and then there is I think some of that like what's the state of the business or state of the market that you want to time it well there. I think there is just also a potential like talent and customer side of things where raising around can signal that you are a company that is doing well and there the next year as well.
Right.
Versus like, I think we had some comments sometimes from the customers that, hey, you're like a Series A company. Right. Can we trust that you will be there? Even though we were like profitable and like we had all the like ability to be there, but often people just see the patterns of like what Series A today is almost like a seed round, and it's like it's very uncertain like if the company will survive.
Right.
So I think like that was another component of like raising a Series B. It made us look a little more like serious for some of these customers, as well as like talent.
Right. So that's a pretty nuanced and thoughtful answer, and it's different than how a lot of founders would answer the question of why you raise money. I mean, typically you would hear, we wanted to hire more sales reps. We wanted to test some new marketing channels. We wanted to be a unicorn. We wanted the press cycle. You guys sort of approach things in every capacity just from like a different set of first principles. And I think your fundraising decisions were reflective of that. And really that's kind of how you guys run the company. So there's kind of this mystique of how Linear does things differently. Like this term gets thrown out a lot, like the linear way. For people that haven't followed the story the last couple of years, what's the best way you can summarize, like, what is the linear way? What is the philosophy for how you're running this company?
Yeah, I think all of it starts from the kind of like initial insight we have that like in order for us to win in this category, we think like we need to be the best product in this category and truly be the best product. I think every founder or product builder, they always want to believe that you are like they're building the best product out there. But I think for us, it was like we really wanted to make sure that is the case. And to me, the best also means that you need to be a quality product. It's like kind of included in that definition to me. And so to me, the quality is one of the things that drives some of these decisions. So one of the main reasons like why we do a little bit things differently is like we had these experiences in other companies. I worked at Coinbase early on, and then I worked at the Airbnb, kind of like more like a later stage company. My other co-founders worked also at Coinbase and Uber. And we've seen this story play out of like you are the hypergrowth company, you hire a lot of people, and we kind of see the effects of that, what happens to the culture, what happens to the product, what happens to the whole company. And we wanted to avoid that. Like that was, we saw that. And then when we started Linear, we kind of told ourselves we don't want that.
Yeah.
And the main reason there is that the faster you grow the team or sometimes even the business, but I think you are kind of diluting the quality of the team or diluting the quality of the culture in the company. So we had this like not exactly a rule, but basically we didn't want to more than double the team every year. So we started with 3 people, then we went to 6 people and 12 and like 25 or something. And so it's like a slow, we're still doubling, but like in a slow way. And part of that is because we saw that like in our experiences, every project in our kind of career, we felt that was done really well. It was always done with a small team.
Right.
And it was never the biggest team that did that best work in a company. It was like few people that did that best work in the company. So our thinking is like, can we just have more of those best people in our company and that they can work on this project with a small team? And the benefits of a small team is like you have less of a communication. You don't need to convince that many people that they like about your ideas. And I think that people can focus more on like delivering that quality. Right. So a lot of this, like all of the things we do kind of culminate into that idea of that quality we think is like important. And that's the thing we drive. And we don't want to sacrifice that because someone's telling us hire more people or we need to chase this growth metric. So being profitable also plays into this quality aspect, I think, because it gives us the freedom to focus on the quality.
Right.
A lot of other startups, what they have to do is focus on the growth, because if they burn the money, they need to go eventually raise the next round, and you cannot raise the next round necessarily if you don't have the growth numbers for it. Luckily, we've been able to do both. So like we can do the quality, but also the growth. But it's more like the quality comes first and the growth second.
Right. There's a lot of good stuff to unpack in there. But one of the things that you just touched on that I really love about this company is there's a couple of points of like really, really like beautiful contrast in Linear. So you talked about the founders came from some of like the iconic hyperscale companies, but you like doing things deliberately and thoughtfully. You also talked about the balance between speed and quality. So I want to tap into those a little bit. So before Linear, you spent time at Coinbase and Airbnb, and your co-founders came from Uber and Coinbase also. So these are like among the most iconic hyperscaler companies out there, yet you're all very principled and deliberate about growing conservatively, still very quickly, but conservatively and durably. At the same time, you're these Finnish bootstrappers, very principled, original thinkers, but you've been at Bay Area companies. You build this tool that's used by over 50% of Y Combinator graduates, over 50% of AI companies are all building with Linear today. So stepping back, do you consider yourselves, like, are you Silicon Valley insiders, or do you think of yourselves as outsiders?
I would still say that we are insiders, that just the fact that, and I was also in YC with my previous company, and I think through there and my other work, I do know a lot of founders and some investors too, and I feel insider that way. But currently, for example, none of us founders live in San Francisco.
Right.
We are outsiders in that sense, like we don't live here. and part of, I think, why we can do that is that we also already had some of these networks built in, or we know some of these people already. And I think that, to me, it's always that you can criticize some kind of path. Like you could criticize the hyperscale or the other side of the coin, but if you haven't actually experienced it or done it, I don't think that you can't really know what it's actually like. Criticizing it, it's a little bit, you're criticizing from the outside, but you don't actually know exactly like why or what are the bad things or good things about it. So I think for us, it's much more that we experienced that and we saw that, and there's some good things, and arguably these companies are very successful. So it's not like a bad path, but then we just didn't feel that that's a path for us, or it doesn't necessarily, it doesn't, the market we're in, the category we are in, we don't have to follow that path, or we can focus more on this, like being the best of class for this type of need.
This is something else that I hear you say a lot that I have really learned from you, which is that the same tactics don't apply from one company to the next. So the way that you're growing linear might not be the way that another software company should grow their business. Just like, what Uber did certainly worked for Uber, what Airbnb did worked for them, but you can learn some things from those companies, but this concept of like frameworks and things that worked from one company to the next just don't apply. And I always, you guys always reiterate that lesson.
Yeah, and I think like Uber and Airbnb are very similar companies, like in terms of like both of them are kind of localized marketplaces of you have supply and demand and people delivering that experience. And like what also happened with them, both of those companies, you have a lot of copycats that are regional, and that market dynamic forces you to grow fast, or you get kind of run over. Like you want to be the biggest player, like you don't want to give space for other players to come. But our market is much more, there's always been almost like, as long as we like been building software, there's always been some kind of bug trackers out there or project management systems. So it's not that this is like some kind of like a new need that we discovered. This is more just the iteration on that need. And so we don't have to like try to rush it as much as some of these other companies. I think the other thing that happened like past decade, I think there's this like Facebook and some of these other successful companies, people also try to like emulate those companies, like the like A/B testing and experimentation and those type of things work really well for a company like Facebook that is a ad-based engagement product that you just want to push the engagement numbers. But I just don't think that kind of operation or tactics apply to like an enterprise company or like our type of company. So I think that's like what I always find surprising in startups, that people are so willing to follow these frameworks or models without actually thinking like, is this can I actually apply this kind of thinking in my company? Does it make sense? Like that it probably made sense for that other company, but doesn't make sense for my company or the strategy I have. So like, I don't think you can follow these other companies so blindly.
Talk about the trade-off between speed and quality, because conventional wisdom is that you can't do both well at the same time. But what I've always observed from Linear is that you have a maniacal focus company-wide on quality, but you also ship very frequently. How have you gotten that balance right?
Yeah, and I don't think actually, we don't believe that there's some kind of problem with doing both speed and quality. I think it's often, they can actually like go hand in hand if you have the right people. If you don't have the right people and they don't have the skills, then you probably can't do that. But there's some tactics that where you have to balance these things. Like if you internally and externally talk a lot about the quality, I think there's the thing that probably always pops into people's heads. It's like, it's about perfection. And perfection is impossible. Like nothing is perfect. And there's different stages of products and features, and no product or feature is never in a perfect state. There's always something lacking or something wrong or something. And so you don't want to build this culture around perfection, because then people don't want to ship anything until it's perfect, and it's never perfect. So So it can slow things down. And I think that's the classic argument that people just get too focused on the perfection and then they don't actually move forward. So I think a lot of startups and companies kind of took the opposite extreme where let's just move fast and don't care about the quality at all.
Right.
But that's not right either. So the one thing, for example, how we balance that in the product work is that we talk about the quality and why it's important. We try to hire people that care for the craft and have the skills. But then when we build new features, we always build them behind these feature flags that we are the first users of this feature, so we can ship the feature to ourselves.
Right.
And we tell the team and push the teams as soon as you can, just put it into the app. Like you can just add the button in there, even if it's horrible. But we can start internally trying it out and see how it fits into the product. And then the next stage is that once we figure out it a little bit more, we can then select some customers or users or people to also beta test it. And at that stage, it can be also a little bit still not that polished or perfect in a way. But then eventually when we push it live to everyone, we expect that the execution of the feature is good. The concept should be good. I go there to click it and see that the animations feel good and these little details feel good. So we kind of expect a high level of polish or some level of perfection before we ship it. But in the end, I think this kind of method of trying to keep pushing the teams forward with their work still makes us quite fast.
Right.
And then we just at the end have this check that have we hit the standard we want to hit with our work we do.
Right. I've always observed that I think you have, I know that you're not striving for perfection, but I think one gift that you and the founders have that maybe you don't even realize is you just have great intuition around it when a product is pretty close to perfect. And which brings me to another contrast. The contrast between your own intuition and responsiveness to customer feedback. When you're thinking about the next iteration, what's next on the product roadmap, how much of it is, what you're dreaming up for Linear versus what you're hearing from customers?
We talk about this internally too, that we tell people that intuition is good and you should use it in the product work. But we want to explain it that you should be training your intuition by talking to the customers and understanding their problems as much as you can. So we encourage the whole team to be answering questions in our community Slack, or when they're actually building features, they should be talking to some users or customers about those problems we're solving. So I always think that the intuition is not some kind of magical force that is there in the universe, but it's more your experience and kind of the training data that you have collected. So I don't know, putting in the AI terms, it's you're training your own product thinking model in your head.
Right.
And the more kind of this data you input there, I think your experiences, your brain kind of makes some kind of connections or distillations of that information. But how we do roadmaps is usually that similarly, we don't have one system for that. I know some companies like to use stack ranking of here's the list of what's most valuable or most requested or something. But to me, it's always been a little bit too simple way of thinking about it. So we often get a list of things from the sales or success or other channels we hear from the customers that we really need this thing and that thing. And so we get that list, and then we also have our own list of, as founders or the head of product or someone else, or what we hear from the team, that these are actually some areas we should really think about or do. And then we look at those both lists kind of together. That is there some kind of connection here? What would make sense to do next? And maybe they're on that sales or the customer list. There's something that connects with that thing we anyway want to do. Right. So then doing both of those things actually make the product more valuable or interesting.
It's really interesting. So, we just walked through these series of contradictions. Are you insiders or are you outsiders? The trade-off of speed versus quality, the trade-off of intuition versus customer feedback. And I think the answer on all three is the value is in the interplay. You have to find the right combination, and you have to do it all. I just think you guys as founders have done a really special job of like finding the right balance of doing all of those things.
Yeah, and I don't know if it partly comes from my background is in design, and I think like design is much more like that. Like it's not that binary world where you have to choose one or the other. There's all these like spectrums of things and like how generally just humans experience or feel about things. And I think there's a little bit that in the industry, a lot of founders come from like technical backgrounds, and I think when your whole career you're working more with this technical systems that are more like binary. There's the right and wrong way, or there's this way of doing. I think some people just prefer that they like that kind of clarity of the world, that things are ordered and there's this binary choice you can make.
Right.
But then our company, I think we just like to think that there's this art and science.
Right.
And you should use both.
Right. Yeah, that's very well put. Because it's a really crowded and competitive industry. There's so much going on with your customer base, the hyper growth of AI, et cetera, et cetera. It can be really noisy. I feel like you find clarity in the mission of focusing on the product. And if you just focus on the product being the best out there, then everything emanates from that. And that's what I hear you all coming back to us with over and over and over again. And it's really impressive discipline.
Yeah, I think to me, there's always, all kinds of advice I think you see on Twitter or somewhere there, where it's like people say that, no, like product is not that important, or distribution is more important, or this is more important. And I just don't agree with that. Like my view of the world is that people do want to use the best tools or products available. And so if we can just do that, we have much more likely chance to succeed. And then you can do all those other things, but I don't want to do all those other things if the product isn't good.
Right.
I think sometimes we also don't want to push the growth as hard in some segments of the market. For example, like we don't want to sell to some kind of customers because we don't think the product is ready yet for that. We think like it will be ready soon, but not yet. And so it's also like being like a little bit, I don't know, critical of how good your product actually you think it is, like what's the state of it, and kind of understanding like where you are in this journey. Right.
One thing that is very clear about the way that you run Linear is everything that you put out into the world is just defined by such high degrees of taste. Like the product is very tasteful. All of the what limited marketing collateral there is, very tasteful. Everything about the company just sort of oozes taste. How do you hire for that? And talk through some of the tactics that I think are unique to Linear around building this this team that you've built.
I think a lot of times the taste comes from the craft. Like when we interview people for any kind of role really at Linear, then we want to see them that they take some kind of pride in their craft, like whatever they do. I think when you understand your craft really well, I think then you also often have the taste to know that what good looks like. And I think eventually that's what taste is about, is that you know when you build something or do something, like, is this good or not? Like maybe sometimes other people might not agree, but I think you, at least yourself, should know that. So like all the engineering roles, all the product roles, we look for that because we think it has to happen. Like in order to product really like have that taste or quality across the board in all of the features, different things we do, it's like everyone has to have that. Otherwise, it's like relies too much on like someone else higher level, like monitoring everything. And I don't think that's doable or that's that effective. It's better if the person who builds it does that. But then it also goes to some of the marketing or some of these other like areas, is that we also look for that. Can you actually go deep into what is this role or what is this task about? So like if you're marketing Linear, it's not, we don't want to see what are the tactics or like playbooks or what are the like growth hacks you can do. You have to like really come to us to say like, what is the message we want to get out of the world? What should the users or the customers understand about us as a company or a product, and like it needs to be really like crystallized, like what the message is. Even if we don't go out publicly with that message, sometimes you want to create a little more than what the actual like the more like core of the message is. But it's kind of like that. Like, can you go find the main thing in this role or in this task? Because then I think it's some kind of like a intellectual clarity,
right?
And kind of like finding the, I don't know, the first principles or the principles anyway.
Right. And I think screening for taste requires sort of a different, more nuanced hiring process. So I'm intrigued by a couple of the hiring tactics that work really well with Linear. Maybe let's go through them, and if we're giving away any trade secrets, we can cut it later. But I would love to hear more about work trials. I'd like to hear more about how we sort of bias towards ICs and at all levels, hiring people that, will actually get in the code or actually get their hands dirty. And then maybe the last thing is just the quality of our recruiting team. We actually have more recruiters than we have salespeople. It's like we almost treat the recruiting pipeline like a lot of companies would treat the customer pipeline. Maybe talk about some of that stuff, starting with work trials.
Yeah, so like work trials, what it means is that like basically every person who joined Linear or is considering joining Linear, they go through this work trial process, and it's basically 1 to 5 days where the candidate works with us, with our people team, on some kind of project that is relevant to their role. So it's like realistic project, not like a fake, like a kind of whiteboard kind of task, but it's actually like if you're an engineer, it's built this feature, here's like a vague like brief about it. And so it's kind of like your job to figure out what's the scope. Like you can use the team, the project team that you have for the work trial as much as you want. So it's not a test that you sit alone and you cannot talk to anyone.
You're like on the team. You're part of for the work trial.
Yeah. So it's like if something is unclear to you, you should just like ask the team. And that's like one thing we screen for. Like, are you able to ask for help?
Right.
Because we are a remote company, you kind of have to do that. We don't know if you need help unless you like ask for it, and you have to be able to unblock yourself any way you can. And if it's like some marketing role, it's about like, hey, do this marketing campaign or something. So it depends on the role. Like we come up with different prompts, and then we pay for that time. So we pay like a daily rate. So we don't want people to do free work. And like the main thing with that process is that we as a company can see how the person operates, like not only their skills, but also like how do they communicate? Can they like scope things? Can they simplify or clarify things? Do they ask for help? And yeah, like what is their style? I think it's kind of like that taste factor that, especially in non-technical roles, I think the style aspect is something we look for. It's like, what kind of like communicator are they? Like what kind of, if for example, if it's a marketing job, we kind of expect that they will write some things.
Right.
So are they like a good writer? And like, do they have like a good style of writing? So that's like that practice, but it also gives the candidates like an opportunity to see how what Linear is about or what the team is like, and how does it feel to work on the actual product or in the company. And I think especially more like senior people that have more experiences, good and bad experiences, do appreciate that. Because like any company and especially startups, often the company can look very good from the outside,
right? But
it can be very messy in the inside.
Right.
And then depends what kind of messiness it is. Like maybe you like that or maybe you don't like that.
Right.
So then this also gives an opportunity to kind of like the candidates to see what we're about.
Yeah, it's a mutual trial process. I mean, I think it sets you up for, we see this phenomenon within Linear where in the first couple of weeks of a new candidate, becoming a full-time employee and starting, I'll hear this feedback that, he or she is extraordinary. This is a great hire. And I think it's because you exert so much effort up front into making sure that there's good mutual fit. And that's pretty uncommon. Mm-hmm. What about this concept of looking for ICs? Because you want people who have been, kicking ass in their last role at whatever company it was. And typically progress in a company also is correlated with you get a small team. So you might have somebody who's an excellent operator and they're used to managing a team of 10, but you want them to come into Linear where we don't have teams of 10 and also be, you know, an IC. How do you get that balance right?
Yeah, I think like a lot of it also probably comes from us, from what the founder DNA. Like we were also, most of us were mostly like ICs in these companies. We were maybe like high level ICs, which kind of has some leadership qualities, but you're not a people manager, which we liked because you're more focused on the work, not people's problems, kind of. Like even still, like we're a startup, so like we should be like putting as much our efforts into kind of building things, and ICs, individual contributors, are the ones that build things. So that's like what we want to see in the company. And I don't know if there's like aspects of the remote or something, but I think since we hire more senior people, they generally don't need that much management. Like I think when you're early in your career, you need a lot of help on like how do you even handle yourself in different kind of situations. So that's like the kind of like the IC that we just see that there's like a lot more value hiring ICs. Obviously, it doesn't like scale forever. Right. So like eventually, you just have so many people that yes, you need different kinds of leads or managers. So we often do like the kind of like the lead structure where there's someone who is a little bit manager-like, that they can communicate well, they can articulate well, they can like recognize blockers or problems.
Right.
But we also try to build more of this culture where like we don't have to have all these different management practices or things going on, but it's more like focused on the work.
Yeah, I was going to get into the question that you just touched on, which is, you know, will this scale? Because prevailing logic on a lot of our practices is, oh, that's great when you're serving small customers, but like you can't sell enterprise software operating that way. Yet here we are, and you know, you're landing some of the biggest enterprises in the Fortune 50. How many of the practices that you founded the company with do you expect to scale forever? And how many are things where you'll evaluate as you go?
Yeah, I don't really know. So I think that's the honest answer. It's like we're not too dogmatic about this, that like we just look at everything, that we just try to do the best thing we can. And if we need more people, if we need more managers to do something better, then we should do that. Like it's not some kind of like we can't ever hire these people. But like even in these deals, we don't see that like you need an army of people pushing these deals forward. It's like you need good people pushing the deals forward. It's like one good salesperson can push it. And then if we need like engineering or some other help, there's often like one engineer, and they can like, if they just focus on that, they can really do it well. And so I think there's the choice there is that it's like, do you hire like a large organization of people that maybe have various levels of experience and skills and ability to do certain things, or you just try to hire very good people that definitely have all of those things, and they can like land the things much more easier.
Right.
So for us, it's also just as founders, that's like a type of organization we want to build. Like we want to build this like high functioning organization, not like the most biggest organization or for us, that would be the dream place to work in. It's like you come to this place, this company, and you have all the people around you are very high quality. And then you are given this or find this task, or like, let's go work on this thing. And then you go work on that thing. And then like, there's nothing else. Like there's no like all that unnecessary stuff. There's not like manager like breathing down your neck of like wanting to get some updates, because then they have to tell those updates to their manager, and that manager have to tell it to their manager. And it's like, there's this like extra work we think that is unnecessary. But there's some aspect of the management things that are obviously necessary, and we might need to like do some of these, or we need to hire some people. But that's just the way we think about it.
Yeah. When you think about the first 500 days of Linear, first year and a half or so, what was the biggest mistake you made, and what was the best decision that you made?
Yeah, I think the mistakes question is hard, because I actually don't feel that we have made big mistakes, and like maybe it's I'm just forgetting them, or or I'm just seeing that like sometimes it's not a mistake. It's like we had to do that in order to like us to learn something.
Yeah, I think you look at your mistakes as like learning moments,
yeah.
and you're better now because of I mean, yeah, I get that.
Yeah, I think there's like an example
I'm glad you don't consider your Series B investor a mistake. That makes me feel very nice about myself.
Well, for example, you could say that maybe we should have hired sales sooner, and we didn't, and maybe that was a mistake. But then also, I would say that we probably weren't ready for it, and if we had done it earlier, maybe we would have gotten it more wrong, or we would gotten it wrong. And I think now we kind of have to go through that stage to realize like why is the sales valuable, or like what does it do? Right. So there's like a natural growth there. I think the best thing is probably just launching the product. Like we had this private beta for a year, but I think at some point, maybe, I don't know, 6 months in or something, we decided that we should be like, we had a lot of people on the wait list to wanting to use the product, and people were asking about it. And we just wanted to keep it private beta to control the initial stages a little bit, that like we can like try to bring in customers that are like a better fit than it, like the first 500 days, it wasn't definitely not ready for large companies or something. Right. So we didn't want them to come in and see like, oh, this product is not that good. But like we wanted to get the type of companies that could be a good fit. So we wanted that control and getting the feedback from those people. But then we just realized that it's not, we could keep doing this forever, and eventually we will need to launch, and it's probably better to just like launch it like as soon as we can.
Right.
So we made a list of things that what do we need to launch it, and there was some technical stuff. There's some other, we needed to figure out pricing, and because we didn't figure it out earlier. So, but in the end, I think that was still right thing to do. And when we launched the pricing, at the same time we launched the company, like open it up for everyone, the product for everyone. Like we got almost all of the companies did convert to the as paid customers.
Right.
And that felt good and motivating.
No, consistent with the theme of, intuition and user feedback. Last question. What does Linear look like in 5 years?
Yeah, tough to say, like, what is it exactly 5 years or less or more? But I think like since the beginning, we started Linear with more like a clear focus of this is like an issue tracker for software teams. And then the trajectory or the path we took is like expanding that idea. As the issue tracker part of it is important because we think like every software company basically needs an issue tracker. But then there's a lot of other things they need, like project management. And when you work on new features, you also need to plan those features. So what we see Linear becoming more is it's more of a product building system for product organizations. So we want to help people earlier in the process, like before they even start thinking about their roadmaps. Could they have a better understanding what the customers are asking for? Do they have like different kind of research or discovery they can do? And then that can influence the planning, which then can help with the execution. And ironically, I don't think these processes are linear, that you actually have to go back and forth with this. Right. Like you start building something, you kind of have to go back to the beginning of like, what are the customers saying? Like maybe we need to go talk to them more. So there's like a benefit having all of these in like one system that then those teams and people who work on this project can do. And then like there is that other direction where we want to see like, well, you work on these issues and you do these projects, what happens next in the workflow? And so there's like some areas we want to look in deeper into the engineering workflows, because engineers are probably the biggest group of users on our platforms. Right. Like, are there other things we could help them with? There's also like the whole, if this is the product building system for companies, then I think there's a good opportunity also bring in this idea of what's the balls of the company or the product building, which apparently, and it's a very hard problem where like any sizable company, any leadership people in a sizable company, it's really tough to tell what's going on.
Right.
But Linear, because that's the platform where this planning and execution happens, we actually have like opportunity to provide this like information layer that what is actually going on. It can be very like distilled information and or react to certain things. So I think there's also like opportunity to help with that side of communication or information, how the information flows between the different layers of the company.
Right. Awesome. It's such a privilege to get to work with you guys. I really appreciate it. And thanks a ton for doing the pod. Well done.
Yeah. Thanks, Miles.